Hello, everybody. Are you ready to rumble? Get it? Because we're on Rumble. Yes. Good to see everybody. Glad you're here. This is Eleanor Goldfield.
I heard that joke before, so that's why I'm not laughing.
Well, because it just occurred to me right before we started that you say, "Are you ready to rumble?" And literally, we're on Rumble. So, there's that. But welcome everybody. We will be getting into. We're going to go through some of the Queen's legacy that's not being talked about for some odd reason. I don't know what it is. I think maybe a piece of the paper got caught in the feed there at the news stations, and they were like, get how it gets jammed, and then you just get the two corners at the top, and they were like, oh fuck, what was that page? Oh, everything horrible that England ever did. Oh shit, sorry.
In the past 70 years.
In the past 70 years, while the Queen's been sitting on her golden throne. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to get into Zelensky. Literally, I love how out in the open it is. At the starting bell on Wall Street, he's just selling Ukraine to Wall Street. So we're going to get into that and some other stories. So thanks for joining us. Please take a moment to hit the buttons, the thumbs up, the likes, leave a comment in the comment thread. Please, everybody, be civil to each other. Deal with each other with respect, unless someone's a fucking loser, and then you deal with them that way.
Our community guidelines are available for anyone.
The community guidelines vary. Actually, one of the pages got jammed in the printer. Fucking. So the page that said treat everyone well. But yeah, so we're going to get a bunch of that. And this is also a podcast, by the way, for those who are new to this and you're new to what we do. It's called Common Censored. You can find it on all your podcast outlets for free. So check that out as well. All right. So, I should go live on Rockfin as well. About a half hour from now, we will just be at rumble.com/LeeCamp. But for this, and it's free to watch there. But for this first half hour, we are on many different platforms. All right, so I'm getting some of this from a Consortium news article. They do good work over there at Consortium. And
I have some things to add too.
Yeah. And, oh man, I left a dumb fucking background. So the cruelties of the Queen's reign.
This is a non-exhaustive list, by the way.
And yeah, and I'm sure some of you saw some of the news coverage, the CNN, whatever coverage. It's all fawning and just, there's not even a hint of maybe this isn't the best person to celebrate. And that's despite the fact that we fucking had a revolution against these folks. It's just like, she held Britain together in troubled waters, or whatever they said, like over the years. It's like, all right, but she both didn't do anything, and at the same time, I think you can hold her responsible for many of the crimes of Britain, as you should also hold their other officials responsible in Parliament, etc. But so they say in Consortium News, Elizabeth ascended to the throne in 1952, reigning over 70 years of brutal legacy of dehumanization of 1 million people across the world. That's what it says on the British flag. And, oh, God damn it. The British royal family stands on the shoulders of millions of slaves who were shipped away from the continent to serve the interests of racist white capital accumulation, at the center of which lies the British royal family. Now, of course, that was before her time, but still, it'd be nice if you mentioned it here and again. A CNN international correspondent from Kenya. So believe it or not, this line was actually said on CNN, which is kind of, I think they were like, oops. He said,
whoever booked this guy is not coming back to work on Monday.
Yeah. Larry Madawo said, the fairy tale is that Queen Elizabeth went up the treetops here in Kenya, a princess, and came down a queen because she was in Kenya when she found out her father had died and that she'd become queen. But that was also the start of 8 years after that, that the British colonial government cracked down brutally on the Mau Mau rebellion against the colonial administration. They herded more than 1 million people into concentration camps where they were tortured and dehumanized. Yep. I don't.
And they used them as slave labor as well. I mean, that's what concentration camps often do. So millions of people were put into millions of people died and were put into concentration camps, murdered by British soldiers, maimed. And there's actually a brilliant video. We're not going to share it here because for folks listening, the audio is not in English, so you wouldn't be able to understand it. But there is a video of a woman who is a survivor of the struggle for independence in Kenya. And this video was actually captured earlier this year in June, which was the Platinum Jubilee, the 70 years of Elizabeth's reign.
The Platinum Jubilee.
Yeah.
Jumptifus, or whatever the fuck. And everybody, even so many Americans were like, I gotta see the Platinum Jubilee Jews.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's like we've been
actually far fewer Jews at the Jubilee than you'd think.
We've been programmed to think that this is really cute and it's so romantic. There's a monarchy. And look, I'm a citizen of a nation that still has a monarchy as well. Sweden still has a monarchy, and it's fucking dumb. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous that I pay taxes so that a family that does fuck all and represents hierarchical violence gets castles and gets to just shake hands with people and wear nice clothes and have extravagant dinners. And that's fucked that we do that. That is absolutely fucking dumb. And it's even on a much larger scale in England. The monarchy is a much more front-facing and much more public affair than it is in other places that still have a monarchy.
And I feel like and in their prime, they had a much bigger empire, and there was more.
Actually, I sent you. Do you have access to your email? Because I sent you a picture that I think is good to.
Can you fill the time?
Yes, I can. So just to give you a little bit of a feel as to what the British Empire means to people around the world. And of course, this goes back beyond Elizabeth's 70-year reign, but she upheld that, right? She never spoke out against it. She was the symbol of the British Empire. And interestingly enough, there are only 22 countries in the entire world that have never been invaded by Britain. And there's the list of the countries right there.
Here's your list of countries that have not yet been invaded by Britain.
Which you'll notice that some of them are in Africa. And so basically, these are African nations that were invaded by a different European power. So kind of assisted or put in, put in a, what's the word? In like a supportive role via Britain, right? So I don't think that we should really count those African nations because it kind of makes it sound like, oh, these African nations are doing fine. They were never colonialized, but that's obviously not true. So you see that like all of the blue are places that were invaded by Britain. I mean, the gray are places that weren't. Like, holy shit. So there's a little bit of context for you, and also why I think it's so important to recognize why people have such strong feelings about the British monarchy in countries that you may never have even heard of, probably because they were invaded by Britain and are still struggling with the ramifications of those invasions. And, you know, we were talking about Kenya, which is a prime example of her reign. Also during her reign, this is not in Africa, this is in Ireland. British troops were given a green light to massacre 14 civilians in Northern Ireland on a protest march against Britain's policy of jailing Catholics without trial. Those shot and killed were fleeing or tending the wounded. And the British government then oversaw a cover-up, and it is now known as Bloody Sunday. And I just also want to take a little note, a little moment to point out that so this is horrible what happened in Northern Ireland, but compare, I mean, I'm guessing a lot of people watching this have heard of Bloody Sunday. Compare that to whether what happened in Kenya is common knowledge, where so many people were put into fucking concentration camps for demanding and basically turned into slaves or killed outright. Imagine that happening in Northern Ireland. And so I think it's also important to note that Britain is a horrific colonialist, imperialist entity, and thereby it is also inherently racist. And we are not hearing about these horrific acts of racism and imperialism and colonialism because the United States, as a dutiful child of the British Empire, agrees with this. And of course, Britain also has blood on its hands from the invasion of Iraq, which is another point that, you know, the Queen obviously had nothing to say about that.
Invasion of Iraq, destruction of Libya, destruction of Afghanistan, you know, they signed off on all these things. But just a little more before we move on from the Consortium News article called "Cruelty from the Queen's Reign" is the headline. Instead of apologizing for its crimes and compensating its victims, the British government launched Operation Legacy, a massive effort to erase evidence of colonial crimes during the period of rapid decolonization in the 1950s to 1970s. If the Queen had apologized for slavery, colonialism, neocolonialism, and urged the Crown to offer reparations for the millions of lives taken in their names, then perhaps I would do the human thing and feel bad, tweeted Cornell University professor Makoma Wa Ngugi. As a Kenyan, I feel nothing. This theater is pathetic. In 1963, the Yemeni people rebelled against British colonialism. In turn, the Queen ordered her troops to violently suppress any and all dissent as fiercely as possible. And they continue to support the U.S. and Saudi obliteration of Yemen today.
That's
the British plundered, I hadn't heard this number before, plundered around $45 trillion from India over 2 centuries of colonialism that resulted in millions of deaths. I mean, just unfathomable. And, you know, then, so you had Indians on Twitter asking, why are some Indians mourning the death of Queen Elizabeth?
Yep.
British ships transported a total of 3 million Africans to the New World as slaves, an empire that brought misery and famine to Asia and Africa. So yeah, that's some of it. That's some of it. And the thing is, like, there could maybe be a little bit of well, let's at least appreciate that she, if she was speaking out against these crimes regularly and talking about Britain's past and talking about, hey, turns out we were wrong to support the United States in invading Iraq and killing 1 million people. There were no WMD there. We are sorry about that. Not that that would fucking solve the problem, but at least she could have spoken out about these things, you know, because a lot of people like to go, well, monarchy doesn't have any power anymore, so It's like, yeah, but they didn't do any. They have the power of their speech. Yeah. They have the power of their fucking castles, and they don't stand there and call out any of this shit.
Yeah, it makes them sound like passive, like passengers on this, you know, monarchy train that they couldn't possibly. Oh, I'm not driving this bus. It's like it's not about whether you have as much absolute rule as, you know, Louis XIV or Elizabeth I. It's about whether you can speak out against something. And, you know, I think I don't know that much of the story, but for instance, when Charles was going to Wales to basically, you know, take up his birthright to be the Prince of Wales, there was a lot of pushback. There could have been a moment where the royal family was like, hey, maybe we can just fucking let go of Wales. Maybe it's really not that important. Maybe we could just like fucking step back. That never happened. Like, you could listen to the people that you continue to oppress, but that's of course not part of this shtick. And I think the other thing that I wanted to highlight is how this is going to basically make any other news story pointless and worthless. And actually, a BBC presenter actually said as much.
Oh,
BBC
yeah.
News presenter Clive Meary said that the energy bill's price crisis is, quote, of course, insignificant now, given the gravity of the situation regarding news of the Queen's death. For those of you who don't know what energy bill's price crisis is, because I didn't either, it's basically an energy price crisis, so that people in England, for instance, won't have heating and won't be able to cook food. And basically in a place like London, England, you know, where literally the Queen is wearing $45 million worth of jewels on her fucking head, people are going to be freezing because they can't get heating. And this BBC News commentator is like, that's not important because the Queen just died. And this
That's
highlights
meaningless because of the shock we have that this young, vibrant 96-year-old has succumbed to what can only be called a mystery ailment.
And also, let's not forget, if you're a British citizen, you're going to be paying for this woman's funeral. You're going to be paying for his son's fucking coronation. So not only might you not be able to cook food tonight, just know that the money that might be able to go to your fucking energy bill will be going so that a dead person can travel in style down a fucking street, and so that her son can get an equally exorbitant crown placed on his equally pointless head.
It is a pointless head.
But you should be glad because you have a monarchy. So do you really need to cook food?
None of that matters now. The young, healthy, impressive, and active, and virile Queen has passed away at the prepubescent age of 96. We can all agree that we should not talk about those other stories now. And yeah, someone actually just mentioned Jimmy Savile, which the Queen was good friends, and the monarchy are good friends. We're good friends with Jimmy Savile when he was alive. This guy was one of the most horrific pedophiles, ever. Just horrific and prolific pedophiles, and was known as a celebrity in Britain for years. This went over decades and decades. And the Queen, when it finally came out towards the end of his life, in the early to mid 2000s, of course, the monarchy and the Queen said nothing about it. Oh, just came out that the guy that they considered to be a good friend. I mean, I can't even imagine the number of events that she did with him, and let's not mention that this has been revealed. Even if she wants to claim she never knew anything, let's just ignore that this has now been revealed and never mention it. And then you also have the racist shit that's done against Prince Harry. It's Prince Harry's wife, right? And apparently that family and the Queen have done nothing to help or speak out to against that racism. The Queen also has or had two severely mentally challenged. I don't know if they were cousins. I don't know their exact family relation, but basically they were hidden. Yeah. They were put into what used to be called just mental hospitals or something that they can't get out of, and they, basically called, given like different names and said they were not part of the family. Honestly, it's like imprisoning a sibling because they're mentally challenged and acting like they never existed. That's the Queen and her family.
And they're Nazis.
And at least the uncle was a big fan of the one who abdicated was a big fan of the Nazis, and went and toured Hitler's Germany. And actually for a moment apparently considered Hitler was going to make him like royalty in Germany, and he considered taking him up on that. And then, of course, during World War II, not of course, I just learned about this the other day, but you had British bankers, the top of the British banking system, still doing business with the Germans and their banking system, and still funneling money from and to Germany. Now, it wasn't that the British bankers wanted Germany to win, because that would have meant the fall of Britain, but they didn't care, because money's money. And so
The US did the same thing.
Yeah, well, to a large extent, but the US actually tried to call them to account slightly by asking whether there was still money going to Germany during the war years. And then Churchill apparently pestered them about it. And they were like, we haven't spoken to them in a year. And Churchill's like, the war's been going on for 3 years. Anyway.
Well, I don't know so much about U.S. banks, but U.S. corporations were elbow deep in Nazis.
GM, Ford, Coca-Cola, IBM. Yeah. Anyway, lovely stuff. So we all will miss the Queen. She's done such beautiful and amazing things for each and every one of us, just individually. Like, she showed up at my apartment once and just brought me, you know, like it's like a grease catcher that goes in your oven, like when shit drips through. And I was out of those, so she brought one over.
You were out of those.
Yeah. Huh. Mine wasn't working.
We're not going to play this because we can't, because otherwise we'll get slapped with some kind of fucking "you're using music you can't" bullshit. But if you haven't already, please go on Instagram or TikTok. I don't know how to tell people to go to TikTok, so I'm not going to, because I don't understand the TikToks. But that's how you say it, right? But check out Caird, CAIRDE, is an Irish dancing group, and
it's actually underscored Caird, right?
Yes, sorry, on Instagram, yeah.
It's a TikTok on Instagram.
So it's on TikTok as well, but I don't know how to tell people about TikTok. But
okay.
I think it's the same thing on TikTok.
Okay.
But there's a video of these guys dancing to Queen's Another One Bites the Dust on like the driveway of Buckingham Palace, and they're doing like a typical Irish dance, and it is so fucking beautiful and wonderful. Like, it just makes me smile, and it makes my whole body warm and fuzzy. It's also just like a really badass dance, and I want to be friends with these people. Anyway, go check that out, because it's a nice way to round out the evening, I think. Any evening, really.
So moving on to another story that is going on right now. And of course, this also involves Britain, because Britain is helping to continue the proxy war in Ukraine. Britain, acting as a U.S. feudal state, has actually been the main go-between with Zelensky to go and tell him not to actually have any successful peace talks. But this is... Just the other day, Zelensky is literally selling Ukraine to U.S. corporations on Wall Street. And this image, this is the old image that's worth 1,000 words. This is the New York Stock Exchange sounding the opening bell with Zelensky.
With a shirt that says "The Power of Freedom." This is some Orwellian shit on a level that I have not... even in fever dreams, I didn't think... They
brought him via video onto the New York Stock Exchange to have him ring in the opening bell. And the reasoning is that he is basically opening Ukraine assets to be sold to U.S. corporations, but all corporate rulers anywhere. But I guess mostly with U.S. and British, etc., U.S. and NATO countries. But basically, there has been several, and I covered this on a recent Most Censored News, that they have the plans to plunder Ukraine have kind of been revealed. The documents are now out there, and they have gotten together for meetings in maybe Switzerland or somewhere. And the plan is basically to do exactly what you would think. All the neoliberal garbage when a country is occupied or taken over by our neoliberal garbage, by our vampires and our fucking parasites. So they're privatizing everything that should be and is currently state assets, like the electric systems and the water. So they're going to privatize those. They're going to basically chop those up and give them to corporate interests. They're also gutting worker rights that were fought for over generations by Ukrainian workers, and they're erasing those in a matter of days. Again, that's a giant giveaway to corporations, right? Because it means that workers will earn far less, and that money that's saved will go to the corporate heads. So it really is like Zelensky and them selling off large swaths of Ukraine to corporate America.
Yeah. And I mean, the military industrial complex has made so much money off of this. And it's often not talked about, but was it March or April where there was already a peace deal that was agreed upon by Russia and Ukraine, and then the US primarily, but Europe as well, who just sycophants to the US, basically said, no, you can't do that. That doesn't work for us. And here is the image of why that does not work for us, because there needed to be a pillaging of Ukraine for the sake of the New York Stock Exchange, for the sake of the military-industrial complex. A peace deal does not work for that. And it's the same reason why, in Afghanistan at the end of 2001, basically all of the Taliban had basically been routed, and the military was sending messages back to DC being like, well, we're done here, guys. And DC was like, no, that doesn't work for us. You have to keep going. And lo and behold, it did. And this is exactly why. I mean, it's so it's just the story that keeps reinventing itself. And now it's reinventing itself in Ukraine. And I know that some folks in the chat are saying the same thing, like, well, look at Iraq, look at Afghanistan. And exactly. This is, Libya. This is the same thing that happens in every single place that is lucky enough to host the US war machine. And it's remarkable. And this one just has a slightly different twist to it, because there are so many people who are unwittingly fighting for the continuation of this war by flying those Ukrainian flags, and saying that we stand with the Ukrainian people. And the intention, though it might be nice, is so ill-advised and poorly analyzed. And this is really what that public opinion is pushing for, is the piecemealing and the oppression of Ukrainian people and the fighting of Russia, as one person put it, till the last Ukrainian.
And this is from Multipolarista. Ben Norton, great journalist, created that outlet. And it's also at radindiemedia.com, RADINDIE media.com. Free to go there and get articles like this one. Multipolarista says, in a speech launching the neoliberal sell-off program that they're calling Advantage Ukraine, Zelensky offered Wall Street a chance for you to invest now in projects worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Yeah, what does invest mean? Oh, own. A chance for you to own hundreds of billions of dollars of Ukraine's wealth, basically, or our resources. The financial news service Business Wire published a press release from the Ukrainian government in which Zelensky boasted the $400+ billion in investment options featured on AdvantageUkraine.com span public-private partnerships, privatization, and private ventures. A USAID supported, that's the CIA cutout, basically branding, laundering their image so it doesn't say CIA supported, but a USAID supported project team of investment bankers and researchers appointed by Ukraine's Ministry of Economy will work with businesses interested in investing. Also quoted the New York Stock Exchange Group, the president of the New York Stock Exchange Group, Lynn Martin, who said, as the largest exchange globally, we stand for freedom, investor protection, and unfettered access to capital. We are pleased to welcome President Zelensky virtually to the New York Stock Exchange Bell Podium, a symbol of the freedom and opportunity our U.S. capital markets have enabled around the globe. We are honored the president has chosen the New York Stock Exchange to mark the kickoff of Advantage Ukraine and engage with the world's business community. Boy, did you ever think you'd see a
I
day?
want to beat him to death with a sack of change.
Did you ever think you'd see the day when they're literally like announcing it in the middle of the war? They're like, yeah, there's a war going on. Bombs are striking behind me, but we're open for business to sell our infrastructure to fucking American capitalists. Unbelievable.
Wow.
And it also, day after day, all of this is exactly what many of us said would happen. And I remember in the first days, like that first month, and I admit I didn't know what was happening at first. It's not like I knew immediately the Russia's invasion and all the backstory and everything that was involved. I knew a little of the history, but you kind of got to figure this shit out. But within a month, I was like, this is going to happen. It's going to last for as long as possible. The U.S. wants to drag it out. They don't actually want peace. And I was arguing with friends and family members, and they're like, no, that's not it at all. Why do you support Russia? It's like, I'm not supporting Russia. I'm telling you the reality of the situation.
I support truth.
I support truth. This is what will happen. The U.S. wants this to go on as long as possible. They want it to be like Vietnam for Russia. They need this proxy war to help split the world's economies because they don't want to allow the continued inroads of China, Russia working with NATO partners, NATO countries that are actually closer to Russia than they are to the United States. And so we needed this so we could put in sanctions to cut all that shit off. And in that way, the U.S. views this as working, but in most ways, this is backfired and is, yet another fucking nail in the coffin of the American empire. But so many people have to, I'm still opposed to it because so many people have to fucking die and become refugees in the process. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. is making sure this continues. And like I said, I'm going to cover on Most Censored News, my other show. I'm going to cover this coming week. It'll probably come out this coming week. How an actual peace deal was essentially agreed upon and was ready to be signed between Zelensky and Putin, Ukraine and Russia. And then the U.S. and Boris Johnson and Britain went running in and said, don't sign that. Yeah. Don't have a peace deal because it does not work for us. We don't want it, so we won't allow it to happen. Yeah. Doesn't seem like Zelensky would have really questioned that. Seems like he's a
useful idiot.
Seems like he's in it to win it for the American empire, and capitalist fucking vampires.
And also, if we're talking about investment in Ukraine, this is a good segue, I think, because Stephen Semler, who we oftentimes will pull from, and you can see we also share his posts on radndmedia.com. And so he did a really great sorry, I find it very difficult to concentrate on what I'm saying when you're skipping through all these tabs.
I don't know how else to do it. I don't know how else to do the show. Which tab would you like me to pull up first between the two?
Okay. So in terms of investment in Ukraine, the Biden administration should at least get some kind of I don't know, maybe like a stadium of some kind, maybe like a concert arena, the Biden administration arena in Ukraine, because as Stephen Semler has pointed out, the Biden administration has approved $40 billion in military aid for Ukraine since August of 2021. So,
and that's not even the entirety of it, because apparently there's been at least $8 billion of transfers that don't count and don't have to be approved by Congress. Not that Congress fucking matters, but basically they just take military equipment from Afghanistan, ship it to Ukraine, and then they can bypass Congress and bypass essentially telling the American public about it.
Right. And as Stephen points out, over the last 6 months, the pace of new weapons shipments has been relentless. It seems like every week There's an announcement from the Pentagon, State Department, White House, or all three about the latest military aid package. For that reason, everyone seems to have lost track of how much the U.S. has committed to conflict. And that's why I put this estimate together. So basically, that evens out to $110 million a day on average for Ukraine. And
you want to know the percentage of weaponry that gets to the front lines, that actually gets used by the Ukrainian military to fight Russia? 30%. 30%. That's not just according to independent media outlets. That's also CBS did a report on that, and then got so much harassment from the U.S. empire and those who protect it that they ultimately said, "Oh, sorry, we misspoke," and they retracted their article. But CBS and CNN have both also said 30%, meaning 70% of all of these weaponry is just going missing out into the world.
Well, I'm sure that'll help when someone's, going hungry or is cold. They can wrap themselves in an anti-aircraft missile.
Yeah, I like to have a few MRAPs that I cuddle in. You just wrap up in. That's why they're called MRAPs.
So, unrelatedly, of course, this is another Stephen Semler bit. Thank you. One day I'll learn how to do this by myself, but until then, I'm just going to.
So would it be distraction if you were the one doing it? I don't remember which one you are.
Probably, yes. There's actually been some really interesting scientific studies done on multitasking and how it's fucking impossible, and how actually your brain ends up doing both things or three or whatever, how many things you're doing, shittier. So next time you think that you're multitasking and everything's going well, just remember that you're doing everything shittier.
Hold on. I didn't hear any of that because I was busy looking at this hangnail. I have a hangnail here, but if you can repeat everything you just said.
No, but that's really fascinating. So why'd you stop the screen share?
Because we were making jokes about multitasking.
Oh. Okay, so unrelatedly, of course, to that $40 billion, at the top of Congress's September agenda, the $47.1 billion emergency funding request Joe Biden submitted to Congress last week. The biggest chunk, $22.4 billion, is for pandemic-related programs, including one that delivers free at-home testing kits to U.S. households. So I just, I think it's funny when there's this there's this neat little correlation, like puzzle pieces. Everything just kind of lines up, and then you're like, oh well, yeah, I just needed like $47 billion. I mean, where could we have found that money? And it's like, oh well, oh look at that. Oh, the Ukrainians got your at-home test kit, everyone.
Right. They got your at-home test kit. They got your
public health funding.
They got your kids' multiplication tables. He's never gonna have those. They got your food stamps. You're not gonna be able to have food. They got your the bilge pump that FEMA was gonna give you to get the floodwaters out of your place. They got that in Ukraine. So actually, this brings up a good point that maybe we should get together a bunch of us average U.S. citizens and go to Ukraine and collect our stuff.
I'm down. Let's go. Who's got a VW bus? So this is also an interesting point, again, with the correlation. There's a timeline of punting pandemic relief. So Biden requested COVID pandemic relief several times already. The first two times, he agreed to drop the public health portion to expedite military aid. Wow. So March 15th of this year, $13.6 billion went to Ukraine, and we got zero. Even though Biden said that he was asking for pandemic relief funding, but wanted to make sure that if anything was going to be cut out of that bill, it was funding for us, because y'all, we can't, you got to keep putting money into that war over there that has nothing to do with your health, that won't keep you warm at night, that won't feed your kids, that won't get you to work or won't get you a job if you don't have one. But you know what? Think of Ukraine and think of that little flag that you got on your door. Really, so that's really who matters, not you.
I mean, I love how anytime that they're like, oh, we need to send more military weaponry to the Nazis in Ukraine, it's done instantly. Congress falls all over themselves. Like, literally, they can't vote for it fast enough. What do you need, 10 billion, 20 billion here? And but everything else, it's like, oh, we need healthcare for Americans. And they're like, okay, we're going to vote on that in 2027. For now, next year, we'll have a committee to analyze whether we could have a vote, maybe, to find money for the health care that we can get by selling off all the post offices.
Yes.
Like, but then it's like, oh, this fucking Nazi fuck needs a bayonet. And they're like, go. Middle of the night session. Get it done. Get it done. The only one raising a concern is, and he's an asshole in other ways, Rand Paul, who he said he held up the vote by saying there should be some oversight into where the money and the military weaponry is going in Ukraine. And for that, he was fucking torn limb from limb, called unpatriotic, and the Ukrainian council that made a hit list of people that they consider information terrorists, they put Rand Paul on it. And they said they want to prosecute him and the others for war crimes. They've also added Roger Waters, Pink Floyd's Roger Waters, to that list as well. He is an information terrorist. Apparently, I'm not big enough to be an information terrorist. I'm working on it.
Hey, you're an information terrorist to me.
Aw, thank you. I think if I could get like 100 more Twitter followers, I think I'd be there. But
come on, guys, let's make it happen.
Hey, real quick, folks. The other streams are going to stop right now, like sneezing when you're peeing. So go to rumble.com/LeeCamp. This will continue. If you're already there, then nothing will change. And it's free to watch there. Rumble.com/LeeCamp. And I will see you there. We will see you there. We got a few more stories. So, yeah, don't go away. Join us.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
God,
if you're under
does anybody remember that?
30, you don't know what just happened. Or 25. I don't know.